when you realize that it's not about you, the sense of freedom and weightlessness you get from that, because we put all of these burdens on ourselves because we're so worried. What are people going to think? How are they going to perceive us? How is this going to impact my future? And we're so focused on that, we can't recognize the freedom in the moments that we have.
Welcome back to another episode of the Sales Gravy Podcast. In the studio with me in Blue Studio is Carole Mahoney, the author of the brand new book, Buyer First. It's an incredible book, and she's back for a second time. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about Carole's superpowers and how she got where she is today. Before we get started, I want you to go check out Sales Gravy University. You may not know this, but over 1,000 sales teams across the globe train their salespeople on Sales Gravy University using our innovative team training hub. If you've never taken a course on Sales Gravy University, you can go right now to learn.salesgravy.com. That's learn.salesgravy.com and use the code FREECOURSE. And if you go to Sales Gravy pretty soon, you're going to be checking out courses from Carole Mahoney, who is here at Sales Gravy Studios shooting courses. And Carole, tell us a little bit about the courses that you're going to be putting on Sales Gravy and maybe your experience today in the Sales Gravy Studios.
It was, everything I thought it would be and more. And the courses that I'm putting up, we're calling it the Buyer First course on Sales Gravy University. And it's really taking the concepts from the book and how do you start applying this in small ways in your everyday. And so, they're, 15, 20 minutes or so long, but they're packed with not only stories, but the data and the research behind the actual techniques and tactics that I'm recommending to people. And we've also added into there, some data from over 2.3 million sales professionals as to why these things are important and what's going wrong there, but also some of the hidden things that we don't talk enough about in sales, and as our own beliefs and attitude towards the behaviors and actions that we need to take, what might be getting in the way. So that's, a little bit of a preview for everyone is that last module, that's where all the gold is, but you've got to get through everything else to get there.
I can't wait to get these things up. We're going to love them. Now, Carole, I've got a text messaging community, and people ask me questions for our podcast guest. And I've got a question from Jim. Jim's out of Salt Lake City, Utah. And Jim asked a question about a deal he's working on, and he says, I've got a stakeholder group that I'm working with, but there are a couple of people that I know are important, but I haven't been able to get to them. And it feels like they're either not wanting to join in and participate, or I'm being kept away from them. What should I do in this situation to try to get in front of these people? Because it's going to be super important for me to get the entire stakeholder group bought in, because this is a pretty big software purchase.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that I would recommend that you do. One is look at and assess, do I have actually everyone in? Because even though there may be two more stakeholders that you need to bring in, there might also be others that are, maybe they can't say yes, but they can detract and start to say no. So make sure you actually do have all of the stakeholders in first. And then the next thing, and this is the beauty of asking the kinds of questions that we talk about in collaborative selling, which are open-ended and sequential, is that by asking those questions that you can start to uncover areas where they maybe have faced obstacles in the past that they've tried to solve this problem but haven't been able to. And I typically find it's when you find those obstacles are usually individual people. And so then it's asking the question, what's important to them? How do they make these particular decisions? And how do we get them involved in the conversation? And sometimes it's just that simple question of sometimes if you're asking questions and you know that this questions that stakeholder knows and the person that you doesn't know, then I still ask the questions. They're like, but they don't know the answer. I'm like, that's exactly the point. When they say, I don't know, then you can ask, well, who does? Because you agree that this is a critical piece of information that we need in order to make this work. How do we get them involved in the conversation? So it's not just a matter of, I need to talk to this person because I need to talk to this person. It's we need to talk to this person together so that we can, and then tie that to the outcome that they're looking for. So if you're a salesperson in a deal that someone is not wanting to introduce you to someone, you also have to ask the question, have I built enough trust with them? Because introducing someone to your boss, that's a pretty big risk if it doesn't go well. And sometimes you have to actually massage that relationship so that you can say, look, I want this to happen for you, but you know that if we don't get Bob involved in this, that this isn't going to ever happen and you're going to be stuck with having to figure out how to do this without the resources that you need. So let me help you. There may be things that I can say to this person that you can't, and I can be the bad guy.
So you almost have to be assertive and really pick your confidence up and take it with you, because the other option is you don't talk to the boss and
it's not going to happen.
Win.
Yeah. I mean, and the other thing that you can do when you're talking about being assertive, because sometimes people, there's political capital that's going on and they want to hold on to some of the power for themselves, is to simply say, so when I go to talk to so-and-so, how do you think they're going to feel about X, Y, and Z? So it's not even asking for permission. It's like, I'm letting you know that I'm going to go and talk to them. And then it's just a matter of, how is this going to go? Because like you said, if we don't have them involved, I was looking at Gong data and they were analyzing calls that happened, like 9,000 calls. And what they found is that 80% of deals never closed if they didn't get those decision makers involved.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
And in enterprise deals, it was like 230% less likely to happen. So you have nothing to lose at this point.
Yeah, I love the way you said that. Well, folks, listen, if you've got a question for a podcast guest, you can send me a text message, text podcast and your question to 706-397-4599. That's 706-397-4599 to text any question there. And if we don't ask and get your question answered on the air, I'll probably answer the question for you when you send me the text message. So, Carole, you were here a few weeks ago, and we did this podcast. It was brilliant. Just loved it. I brought you on because I listened to your podcast with Mike Weinberg, and I was so jealous. It made me mad because I was like, he cannot have guests as good as you on his podcast. So it was really good. But we took time to explore conversation and communication and discovery. Today, I really want to spend some time talking about you.
Okay.
And I want to explore your origin story. So you are an accomplished consultant, a coach, a trainer, a go-to expert on sales and marketing and lead gen, and now today's you're an author, Buyers First. And we talked a little bit about the process that you went through last time to write the book.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, they aspire to own their own business and be consultants or be be an entrepreneur. I'm curious how you got to this point. And before you answer that question, let's talk about Maine for a second. Okay. So you live in Maine, which is a hotbed of consultants. There's and sales experts in Maine. So did you always live in Maine, or did you just end up there at some point?
I kind of ended up there. So I was born in Massachusetts. So I was born in Lowell, Massachusetts. The majority of my family is from either Lowell or Tewksbury or Wilmington, just outside of the suburbs, North Shore of Boston. And I guess that's the other part of it is I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. Like my father had a business, my mother had a business, my grandparents had a business. My grandmother was one of the first women to own a real estate brokerage in the 70s, and I spent my summers with her. And so, it's kind of weird because I spent half of my time in Massachusetts and then half of my time in Maine growing up. Like most people in Massachusetts go to Maine for the summers. I was going to Massachusetts for the summers. Like it was just backwards. And then when, so I grew up in Maine and I grew up in Massachusetts. But then when I started to have my own family, I decided I wanted to stay in Maine because I love the outdoors. I love nature. We were talking about LL Bean before. It's an annual pilgrimage for me and my husband. During the pandemic, we couldn't do or go anywhere. And so we just went to Bar Harbor for our anniversary. And so I grew up in the outdoors. Like camping was our vacation and long weekends were spent hunting. And it kind of instilled in me this love and respect for nature and in the environment and so forth. And so that's kind of how I ended up staying in Maine and now live in the woods, in the boonies. Like literally our convenience store is called the Boonies. And I love being able to go out into my yard and pick my breakfast or my lunch out of my own gardens. And I have all of these herbal gardens everywhere. We have like every walk of animal wildlife that you can think of, from moose to fisher cats and coyotes and bobcats and skunks and raccoons. Oh my. But yeah, it's great. I live on a lake in dirt road. Lots of wildlife preserves around me, and it's a great home base for sure.
And speaking of coyotes, did you know that the only documented a human death from a coyote attack, was in Maine?
Really?
So you have vicious coyotes in Maine.
Apparently we do. And now we're getting wolves too.
Oh my goodness gracious. Well, the wolf is the only predator for the coyote.
Yeah.
So
that's why I think we're seeing them, because we have so many of them.
Yes. So tell me about your lake.
So my lake is technically a spring-fed aquifer pond, which is about 60 acres. So it's about 3/4 of a mile by 1.5 miles. And the thing that I love about it is there's no public access. It is only people who live there that actually have access to it. So we have about 55 feet of water frontage. We live on the top of the hill, so there's like an 800-foot drop as you start to go down the hill. But the beauty of it is that I can see the lake, I can see the sunrise, I can go down and enjoy the lake when I want to, and then I can come back up the hill when I don't want to deal with people.
I like it.
So we have all kinds of camps and cottages that are all around. You know, every 4th of July, there's a boat parade where everybody dresses up and they go around the lake. And my sister has like a cottage down the street. And so like I'll just paddle the kayak over to her house in the afternoons and hang out there. And we have a little, everything in our house revolves around us being able to see more of the lake. So we have this 50-foot wraparound deck that has all views of the water that I go outside and I do yoga on and have my morning coffee. And in the summer times, if I'm on a conference call, you're going to see the lake in the background because I'm going to be out there. And, we have this little sunken fire pit over to the side that's kind of built into the hill so we can overlook the lake. We just blew out all of the windows on the backside of the house that face the water. So there's literally huge picture windows and sliding glass doors like everywhere so that you can just see more of the water in the lake. It's
amazing.
Beautiful.
And then you post it on Instagram, make everybody feel jealous. And it's awful. So you grew up in a family full of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. And how did that impact who you are today?
I mean, I didn't really fully realize how it impacted me until I started to think about going into college. And like, I was one of the first people in my immediate family to go to college, or my sister and I to go to college and think we were going to like work in corporate America, like work a 9-to-5 job. Like we didn't do that in our family. But my thinking is that as I went to college, I was writing a business plan for the business that I wanted to open afterwards, that I worked in corporate for 5 to 10 years to get the experience and the credibility that I needed. Like I had this whole plan mapped out of how I was going to do it. I was buying rental properties to build up investments and things like that. And then the recession happened and it all went away. And so like all the properties went away because of, people not paying their rents. I lost my job like right after I had graduated college as an adult. And so it was one of those things where I had always planned on becoming a business owner after I had got all of my ducks in a row. And then it was like, nope, your 5-year plan just became a 6-month plan because that's how long you've got unemployment to figure it all out. And I was so burned by that corporate experience and how like they just treated people like a number, both their customers and their employees. And I'm like, why am I spending... And I was working like 60 to 70 hours a week, driving an hour and a half in and back. So 3 hours a day in the car, had 2 kids, rental properties that I was managing. It was insane, the amount of work that I was doing and the stress that I was under. And I was like, why am I doing this for someone else anyway, to make them rich so that they can go buy, another stupid sports car or something that they drove in every day? Yeah, it was that. And so as I'm driving home from getting laid off of my corporate job, messy tears are running down my face. I called my fiance and he's like, so what are you going to do? And I'm like, screw it. I've got nothing to lose at this point. Like I've always kind of just put the dream off of starting my business because of the security of the paycheck and all, you just kind of get caught up in that. I was like, I don't have anything to lose at this point. The rug's been taken out from underneath me. So it's either sink or swim. And so screw them. I'm going to become wildly successful in my own business. Uh-huh. And so that's how I ended up starting my own business. And I mean, I say my first business, but really, I mean, even as a teenager, I did babysitting jobs and had, yard sales. And even when my kids were young and I was a stay-at-home mom, I ran a daycare center. I'm like, well, if I'm going to stay home and watch my kids, I'll just watch everybody's kids. So I've always had small little side gigs or little hustles on the side growing up. But like full-time, paying my mortgage and paying my bills by whatever I'm able to accomplish, that was a first for me.
Scary.
Wicked scary, as we say in Maine.
I like that. So when you talk to entrepreneurs, and I spend time with entrepreneurs that come to our mastermind groups, and there are a lot of entrepreneurs on Sales Gravy University.
Oh, good.
Entrepreneurs have a dream.
Mm-hmm.
They decide that they're going to build something. But so many of them don't see themselves as salespeople. Like They don't understand that they have this role to play for their own selves, which is to go sell their business. And like when I became an entrepreneur, it was literally me, a telephone, sitting in my home office every day with my wife coming home asking me what I sold today because I was rolling the dice with our retirement savings. And that was it. That was
Yep.
all I had. All I had was a cold call. That was my entire day.
Yeah.
But I knew how to sell. I grew up selling. I was trained to sell. That was the only thing I ever did. But there's a lot of people who start businesses, whether it's a franchise or they start, an HVAC company or what have you, that are completely disconnected to selling.
That was me.
Okay, tell me about that.
Well, I mean, as I said, I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. My grandmother was my first sales role model. No one in my family liked her. She was the devil incarnate to the rest of my family because she was a saleswoman. She was always on. She was always asking questions. It didn't matter what or where. We could be at a wedding and she'd be selling.
She was whipping a credit card out.
She was whipping her business card. Yeah.
Yeah,
I tell this story in my keynote in the book, like when we spent our summers with Grandma Mahoney. So we went to all of her networking events, all of her listings. Like she taught me how to network and introduce myself by the time I was 10 years old. By 12, I was balancing her books. Like she had me in the business and she would take us to get our hair done. So we look all cute, like cute little kids, cookies baking in the house, sold. And the funny thing of it is that even her, like her doing those kinds of things, I still had this negative perception of sales because the other side of my family and her, two totally opposites. And so the blue collar family, they would come home and they would complain about all of the salespeople that they had to deal with every day. And that was the dinner conversations I heard. This one's trying to scam me. This one's, charging too much because they ran like a sporting goods store. And so they were dealing with vendors all the time. And I'm like, I don't ever want to be that person that calls people and interrupts and scams them and stuff like that. And even though I didn't quite make the connection that Grandma Mahoney was a salesperson, like I just thought she was, she's a businesswoman. This is what she does. But no, she was a salesperson. That's why they didn't like her.
So she was the person that she was waiting in line at the grocery store to check out, and the person in front of them, she'd be asking where they lived and what type of house they had, and when was the last time they sold their house and when they want to buy it, and do they know anybody that wants to list a house?
Absolutely.
Everywhere, all the time, always
anywhere.
on.
It did not matter.
Grandma Mahoney was a fanatical prospector. How about that?
She absolutely was. She was the queen of fanatical prospecting in 1977 and beyond. And so, yes, she would have loved your book. But for me, when I started my business, because I had also, in my corporate job that I got fired from, I was working with the sales force. It was a 250 person outbound calling center.
Oh, wow.
It was like walking into, it was walking onto the trade show floor with frat parties going on. And so that was what I worked with every single day. I was the liaison between that floor and the marketing team and the IT team and making sure that everybody had what they needed, like whiteboarding out all of the campaigns and making sure that leads are being delivered. And so
were you a project manager or were you marketing?
I was marketing and sales operations.
Okay.
And they also put me on cold calls because they thought it would be fun.
Oh, I know that. I walk into our CFO's office often and go, you have 15 minutes to make $15 and set one appointment. Here's your list. Go. Just to see the look I get.
Yeah. And actually, it was a really good experience for me in the regards that I got to, because it was part of my onboarding to see what is it that salespeople need to do every day so that I know that I can support them in doing that. And so it was literally an auto dialer. I think I was spent an hour making 100 phone calls or something like that.
But you didn't wake up in the morning
and go, let me do that again.
And say, hey, can I get some more of that?
No, but then I found out how much they made. And then I was like, as I'm working with the sales team and they're giving me some gruff about some of the things that I'm asking them to do, I'm like, that's all right. If you don't want to do it, I'll do it, but I get your commission.
Yeah.
Then suddenly they were willing to do it. But it was that experience and then my family's experience that I just had this perception of sales as like the pushy, slimy, sleazy used car salesman that's, cold calling, interrupting people. And I don't want anything to do with that. I'm going to do it differently. And so when I started my business, I started working with other marketing agencies and partnering with them because I was doing like SEO and internet marketing. And This was 2007. So they were still trying to figure out how to spell SEO in the agency world. And I was the only one in Maine who knew how to do it. And so I was working with them. But then when I started observing their sales processes, I was like, I ain't doing that. Like, I'm going to go through 15 hours of meetings to then have a 2-hour pitch and cross my fingers that they might buy. Of course, they didn't know how to sell, and I didn't know that. And that experience is what made me want to write this book because I devoured everything I could about sales, but I couldn't figure out why it wasn't working for me because most of the books were written for people who sell in companies. And selling as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, is a different game altogether. Because as a salesperson, you're selling someone else's stuff. It's not you. It's not your value. It's not your expertise. It's their stuff. You say no to it, that's okay. But as a business owner and entrepreneur, it feels personal.
It is personal.
It is.
And sometimes it's putting food on the table.
Exactly. And so the stakes are higher, and the pressure that we put on ourselves is so much more. And we're not equipped to sell, because unless you've been in sales and you go into business for yourself, you don't know how to sell, and you don't see yourself as a salesperson.
Well, I will tell you from my experience. So similar, we started this company 17 years ago, right in the middle of the Great Recession.
Mm-hmm.
And I was corporate job, thought I worked for the same company my whole life. Very similar story. There's tons of them out there.
Mm-hmm.
Got completely disillusioned by how it was treated when, everything went down. And I had to wake up and start selling people on hiring me. And when people told me no, it hurt. And everything that I knew about sales, and I'm like, this is my whole life. All I've ever done is sell stuff. It all flew out the window the moment that I was selling me. Easy to sell other people's things,
Mm-hmm.
but hard when I'm selling myself. And even today, 17 years later, when I'm much better than I used to be, the reason that I have a sales team and we have a sales office and we have people around me is because, first of all, my team will say, you'll just give it away for free because you like doing the keynote. And I'm like, you're partly right about that, because I like what I do enough that
I would do it for free.
I would almost pay people to do it.
Yep.
But the behaviors, like the emotions that it causes you as an entrepreneur when you're trying to close, betray you.
Oh, yeah.
They are they cloud your judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you're starting a business, they make you make deals that you probably shouldn't have made. You end up with a lot of customers that are the wrong customers for you.
Mm-hmm.
You discount your prices when you didn't need to. It causes deep insecurity, because when they reject you, if they are rejecting you, I mean, there isn't like we can say, just let it roll off your back all you want to. It
Right.
doesn't roll. It's a knife to the heart. So I totally get where you're coming from, but you came from a background where you saw Grandma Mahoney, the fabulous, fanatical prospector from the Northeast, going at it at the grocery store, but you had a negative perception of salespeople. And which is, by the way, you think about my background, I've never had a negative perception of salespeople. I think sales is the most noble profession in the entire world.
It's
the
now.
profession that I chose.
Mm-hmm.
I, by the way, chose this over being a lawyer, which I think is number one on the list.
On the list of least trusted, yes, it is.
So I come from a family of lawyers, but I've always believed that I was doing the right thing. And it's so funny to hear a different perspective. But you think you came from that perspective where you saw sales as the caricature of like a used car salesman. That's what you saw.
Yeah.
Me, I see a professional person. You're trying to will yourself to sell you in an environment where it hurts badly.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So talk to me about the early part of starting this business. So you're working with agencies. You're doing classic SEO, maybe some SEM.
Mm-hmm.
You're helping with analysis. You don't have tools like Ahrefs or SEMrush or any of those tools.
No, this was like in the early days of SEMrush.
Yeah.
Ren Fishkin was just starting to figure it all out. Google Analytics was the most advanced technology that anyone had ever seen before. And, pay-per-click ads were like magic.
Oh, yeah. And all of the SEO people were essentially witch doctors. So
yes, at the time. And still.
So you're starting this business off, trying to build. Talk to me about the early mistakes that you made.
Oh, Lord.
When you were doing this.
Well, you listed a lot of them. So first was taking on the wrong clients. And so taking on the wrong clients, I'll say this. When I decided that it was time for me to get serious about learning how to sell, I hired a sales coach. And when the coach asked me, he's like, well, what's your number one goal? Now, I had somehow muscled my way to like $10,000 a month in monthly recurring revenue. And the thing of it is that a lot of the other agencies or freelancers that I knew that were in my space, they were trying to get to where I was.
Which you think about 2007,
yeah,
you come out of the corporate world and you're getting $10,000 a month in revenue, and pretty much it's all profit because it's intellectual. I mean, it's the work that you're doing. I remember that point where you think I'm printing money. Like this is.
Oh, I thought I was, king, what?
Yeah.
And except for I hated every one of my clients. I didn't want to get up in the morning. They drove me insane. They were not the right people for me to be working with. I shouldn't say I hated all of my clients, but there were some that were especially big pitas. And so when I hired the coach, he said, well, what is your goal? He's like, you're already at a place where most people are trying to get to. I'm like, I want clients that I actually enjoy working with, that actually listen to my advice and do what they say that they're going to do. So if you can help me to find those people, I will be very happy. And what ended up happening is that in 6 months, I had gotten rid of all of my pain in the butt clients, replaced them, less of them, but at more dollars. So I had less clients, but the same amount of money that I was making. And the client that was the biggest pain in the butt, I sent them their money back. And when I sent them their money back, they came back begging and pleading for me to continue to work with them. And I tried, but then they didn't change. And so that was the first mistake that I made was working with anyone who was willing to pay me, because I was desperate to make money to get to that point. It took me a while to get there.
Because when you're in that situation where you feel vulnerable to rejection, what you end up doing is taking the people that no one else will work with.
Exactly.
Because they're easy to sell.
Yes, exactly. And that's how I ended up with so many pains in the butts. And then I started burning out and doing the work and all of that. And so that was the early days, just I joined BNI. I went to all of the networking groups. Even my coach at the time when we were in this group coaching, he's like, you have more opportunities in your pipeline than anyone else. He's like, but how is it that you still hate selling? I'm like, I just don't enjoy it, but I know that I have to do it. And I'm spending so much time and effort in doing it, still getting the wrong ones. Like, I need to know what it is that I'm doing wrong. And what I didn't realize, it was my perception of sales that was actually getting in my way. Like, I knew the mechanics and I knew what to do, just couldn't seem to do it in the moments on the call with the client when I needed to. And so that was my first mistake, was taking anybody who would pay me. The next mistake I made was working within their budgets, i.e. discounting, because they undervalue what you're actually worth. You can't actually do the work that you need to do in order to see success and get testimonials and results and build that social proof because you've been able to get those results. So yes, I was making, a good monthly return, but I was churning through clients left and right and constantly having to replace them, or the ones that were sticking with me were the ones that were the pain in the butt and sucked all of my life and energy out of me. So those were the two biggest mistakes, taking anyone who would pay me and then discounting. And then I think the other biggest mistake that I made was not systematizing and writing down my processes early enough. And so it was always this kind of winging it, trying to figure it out as I go, every time I put a proposal together, it was a new proposal with all kinds of new stuff in it. I had too many options in there for people to choose from. I was relying on the proposal to do all of the work and the selling for me. I would do the discovery call, find enough pain. Okay, here's how I'm going to solve that problem in pain. I couldn't understand why that 15-page proposal didn't generate more business for me. So those I think were my three biggest mistakes when I first started my business. And then the other one, and I'll add this as the bonus, was I kept waiting for people to come to me and didn't do the proactive prospecting. I was going out and I was doing networking, things like that, but I wasn't going after those accounts that I actually thought were going to be the best fits for me and really being niche and selective about who I was going after. It was just I'm going to grab as many things off of the shelf as I can right now and see which one's going to work out for me.
So let's move forward. So you've got the awareness of all of these things. When does it shift? When do you get that change in your business where the way I can say this for me is that there was a shift for me at some point where I started to figure it out, and I had the confidence that my business was sustainable. There's all the stats about how many small businesses go out of business in their first year, how few of them make it past the third year. I figure going on 18 years at this point that we're pretty safe. I still worry about bad things happening to us.
Right.
But there was a point, it took me about 3 or 4 years to finally get to a point where I was like, okay, I got this. What was it for you?
So the aha moment for me, and I can remember it vividly, I was driving home from a networking meeting, and I was driving up the hill towards my house, and I just remember thinking, you know what? Like you were saying before, that rejection and how much it stings because they're rejecting you. And that's when I realized it's not about me. they're not actually rejecting me. They're actually just rejecting the offer for help. And it was when I started to realize that, it felt like this huge weight had just come off of my shoulders. Because when I realized that it wasn't about me, it suddenly opened the doors and the freedom for me to do and say anything I wanted. And you
began to channel Grandma Mahoney.
I did. I did channel Grandma Mahoney. She would love this. And that's the moment where I started to realize I've been going about this all wrong. It's why I have the t-shirts. It's why I say it's not about me all the time to people, not because I just want them to focus on their buyers, but I also want them to realize that when you realize that it's not about you, the sense of freedom and weightlessness you get from that, because we put all of these burdens on ourselves because we're so worried. What are people going to think? How are they going to perceive us? How is this going to impact my future? And we're so focused on that, we can't recognize the freedom in the moments that we have. So that was the moment. And then after that, when I felt that sense of freedom, I started taking bigger risks. I started investing more in myself. And it was through that process, like hiring the coach and then continuing to invest in myself, both like, getting a coach, getting a coach for all kinds of aspects of my business where I felt like I was falling down, like in the process side and those things. It was when I started actually looking for help in those areas that I started to see things start to turn around, where things started to become more predictable. And I was having a blast at it. And then the biggest transformation was when I realized I wanted to do this for other people. I want to teach other people and other business owners and other salespeople how to sell to today's buyer. Because what I was seeing happening in my clients was we would deliver, all kinds of leads for them that were their target buyer, that had high intent, and their salespeople couldn't close them. And so now I was losing clients, not because I wasn't able to deliver the work, but because their people couldn't close. And that means they didn't have the money to pay for any outside services. So I was like, if my mission was to always help small businesses to grow, because they're the majority of our economy here, they're the ones that are putting food on the table for their families, they're the ones that are creating jobs. And so if I'm going to help small businesses to grow, I need to teach them how to sell. And in a way that is in line with and takes into account how people today buy given the internet. And it was at that point that I was like, I hung up the marketing hat, the demand generation side of things, because at that point, people had figured out how to spell SEO. There were plenty of agencies out there that can do the kind of work that I was doing, but nobody was doing this part. And so that's kind of when things started taking off, because the other thing that I realized is all of the money in organizations is on the sales org. It's not in the marketing org. And so I was like, if I can take this and start doing coaching for people, and that's how it started. I started doing one-to-one coaching just to like test it out to see if this is something that's really viable. And then the big break was I started coaching a rep at a large software company who was like on a plan. He was about to get fired, and we completely turned it around in 6 months. And then his boss, his manager said, I want to know how you did that with John. And so then I started working with him. And then David introduced me to everyone on his team. And then everybody wanted to know how David's team was managing to blow past their numbers so consistently. So then it was one of those things that it just started spreading throughout the whole organization. It's like, you lose 100 pounds. Everybody wants to know how you did it and who's the person that you worked with.
But you picked up that anchor client. That one client, because that was the shift that moved our business from doing great to like a force of nature. Was we got lucky. We just had it was fortuitous. It was, you can give it to God. We got that anchor client, and then we got successful here, and then it built and grew and grew and grew and grew and grew, and it changed everything. Yeah.
And I will say this, and I will share this with every business owner and salesperson who's listening. The way that I got that anchor client was I had actually tried to work with them before, and he ended up ghosting me. And so I have this process, and we talk about it in the course, where we go through and look at, all right, go look at all your closed lost opportunities and then reach back out to them again. Like, what happened? Like, how are things going? And so I reached out to John, and I did that. He's like, oh my God, I'm so glad that you reached out. I was so embarrassed that I wasn't able to work with you earlier because we weren't able to come up with the funds, but now I have the funds, but I didn't know how to tell you. So if you're willing to do this again, like, can we move forward? Send me the invoice and I'll sign it right now. And I was like, all right. And it just snowballed from there.
And that's, it's funny you said that, because that's a strategy we use this quarter, is go out and call and reach out to all of our closed lost opportunities over the last 4 years. And we've had so many conversations, so many customers come back to us that were they said no, and then what they chose didn't really work well for them, and they
Right.
recognized they made a mistake. I think that's true for also calling in active customers, people who used to work with you, but they're not working with you anymore.
Yeah.
Call them back. They're like, they were thinking of you, but they're not thinking they're going to call you. I think that's powerful. So you got yourself an anchor client.
Yeah.
And that helped you build and grow a sales practice. So you went from, I don't like salespeople except for Grandma Mahoney, to a corporate job where you were a liaison with salespeople. You did a little bit of cold calling, but you didn't wake up every day and think, I want to do cold calling.
Yeah.
To the Great Recession, kicked you out of your job and gave you that kick in the rear end to say, Carole, here's the deal. Are you going to do this or not do this? So you decided you were going to do that. Then you hit the wall of being a brand new entrepreneur and realizing that it's a lot harder on the inside than it looks on the outside. But because you didn't want to starve to death, you figured out you had to sell somebody. So you did the classic thing of bringing in a whole bunch of customers that weren't really the right thing for you until you hit rock bottom. You got a coach. You started learning how to do it. Then you thought, well, I need to shift because the money's in sales and I'm pretty good at this and I can coach people. You land an anchor client. Did I get all that right?
Yep.
And by the way, dedicated to helping small businesses, which is why we've spent so much time and effort on Sales Gravy University, bringing people like you in, because we know there's a lot of individuals who work for small companies and a lot of small companies that can't really afford sales training at the level that large companies can.
Right.
And so we created a platform for them. So we have that in common. So take us up to now. So here you are. You've gone from, I don't like salespeople, to
Talking to them every day on purpose.
I'm dealing with, there you go. Talking to salespeople every day on purpose. Tell us about your business now. Like how you, I mean, what a run.
Yeah.
So we've been doing this for about the same amount of time. It was 2007, bottom fell out of everything, the beginning of Sales Gravy.
Yeah.
So here you are today.
Yeah. So today, so what's happening today? So now, I've gone from on top of that, I'm teaching, and coaching Harvard Business School students on coaching. So I've gone from, living in a trailer to Maine to writing a book to teaching at Harvard. Cool. But now what the business is really focused on, so it started that transition of just focused on real individual contributor, one-to-one kind of coaching. And then it moved into like manager coaching, as to coach the managers to have a bigger impact. And then it moved into, it was one of those things that I'm so focused on what's all of the things that touch coaching. And there's so many things. It's the manager, there's, the how the person was hired. And so I looked at, all right, how can I make a better coaching environment for the people that I'm working with? And so I worked with their managers. I worked with their leadership so that they were bringing the right people in and onboarding them properly so that individual contributors in companies could have the best chances of success. And same thing for small business owners. Like, once they're doing the business owner or the founder-led sales, they get to a point where like, all right, I need to hire my first salesperson, but I don't want to do like the 50-50 chance. I could have better odds at blackjack. And so the business has grown and expanded because I've focused on everything that touch how the individual is able to succeed. And that's why I started this book for that individual contributor, because, sometimes we get this trickle down effect of the training from organizations and it's like trickle down economics. It doesn't always work that way. And so I wanted to give it to the bottom line people first. And now the business is kind of morphing into like Sales Gravy University is a huge part of this and being able to scale to get the message out to more people. And now I'm really focused on speaking on more stages and doing more keynotes because I love spreading the word and sharing the message of it. And that is what I think is going to help more people to understand what selling is really all about. Because I'm on a mission to change this perception of sales. Because if we can change the perception for the majority, we can change sales. We can get more diversity involved. We can get, people looking at sales as to be as trusted as doctors are. Because we're relying not on, well, this is how we think it should go, or this is how it went at our last company, but actually using data and science to gain the level of respectability that it deserves. And so that's kind of my mission now is I want to get on more stages, talking and stalking more people so that they understand that sales is not what you think it is. This is what it actually is. And this is how we're going to make the world a better place when we all understand this collaborative nature of sales, because it is about connecting problems and solutions together. So I have another book in the works already in my mind. Outline is drafted. I'm probably going to be starting that this summer when things start to kind of cool down a little bit, if they do, because things are looking pretty busy. But that's kind of where I'm thinking I'm going next. So like, launching a speaking business is launching another whole business in and of itself. But I want, like Unbound Growth to be able to it has the systems and processes in place, and we're looking at other ways like adding AI into our coaching program so that we can scale it even more, so that more and more people can start to embrace this idea of sales as being collaborative.
You need to be careful, because if you keep writing books like this, you're going to be like me and you're never going to see that lake again. You won't even see home. Very good. What is the Carole Mahoney superpower?
Carole Mahoney's superpower. My husband would say that my superpower, actually, I asked him this once because someone had asked me about what my superpower was, and I didn't know what it was. So I asked him, and he said, you just don't give up. Like, you see a vision of something or the potential of something, and it does not matter what is thrown at you. You will find ways through it, around it. You will blow it up. You will dig holes underneath it. Whatever you have to do, you make it happen. And I was kind of reflecting back on that. And I even had a friend of mine, Robin Dreek. He's another author, but he was the behavioral analyst for the CIA and the FBI. And so he writes a lot about like grit and resilience and things like that. And so when I was on his podcast, he's like, okay, you're like the most resilient and gritty person that I've ever met. And I'm like, this is coming from an FBI behavioral analyst. I should probably listen to what he's saying. But my husband said the same thing. It's like, I somehow see the potential in what something could be, and I won't rest until I see that potential realized. I love seeing things grow, whether it's people or it's plants or like even my home. We actually had an appraisal done on our home this last week, and the woman called me. She's like, okay, can you tell me about all of the things that you've done? I'm like, yeah, how much time do you have? Because I have completely gutted this house, rebuilt it in the vision that I wanted for it, and I'm not done yet. And I think that's my superpower, is being able to see the potential of growth in individuals and in situations where, and then making and finding a way to make it happen. And if you tell me I can't, that means I'm going to.
I love it. I think that's a superpower for salespeople, for entrepreneurs, for anyone who wants to be successful. Nothing holds you back. You'll find a way. Folks, go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold, and go pick up Buyer First. Go pick up this book. I've read it. It's fantastic. It is a classic. So go grab that. Go check out Carole Mahoney. You're going to find her on LinkedIn, on Instagram. She's all over Instagram. It's driving me crazy. I think she's more on Instagram than I am, so I've got a lot of work to do. And you'll find her online. But she's an amazing personality. And thank you for joining us on the podcast. And I want you to do what Grandma Mahoney would do if she was right here. She would go check out Sales Gravy University at learn.salesgravy.com. That's learn.salesgravy.com. And folks, if you've never taken a course before, you can take your very first course for free by using the code FREECOURSE at learn.salesgravy.com. We'll see you next time on the Sales Gravy Podcast.